the When We Were Young festival.
Oh,
Like literally
no
every
way.
band I've ever liked is going to be there, so I'm super excited.
I thought that one sold out in like seconds.
Oh, it did. I was on the queue like instantly, and Saturday sold
I
out.
was
And then
too.
while I was on the queue, Sunday popped up. And so my best friend actually is going on Saturday, and I'm going on Sunday, and there's no resale, so we're going alone.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. Like, honestly, if you even go by yourself and you're like out in the parking lot, it might be worth it, you know, just to
for
listen to
sure.
him play again.
Oh yeah, like it's almost every band I've ever liked, like My Chemical Romance, AFI, The Used, like even Avril Lavigne's gonna be there. Like it's like
Avril,
it's
man, she's
crazy.
coming back.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you have already seen it, but I'm not sure if like this would also interest you, Michael. But have you guys heard or seen that show Candy on Hulu?
No.
My wife Brenda, she was the one that initially brought it up to me, and I was like, "Oh, is this?" And she was just like, "Well, it's kind of like this like thriller TV show, and nothing too crazy because it's on Hulu, but it has Jessica Biel as the main character,
Oh, yes,
Candy."
I did see it. It's based on a true story, is
Yeah,
it?
actual
Okay.
events.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did see it.
The overall premise is that, and you know, this isn't spoiling anything because I think this was in the trailer, but it's like this girl, she's like involved in this murder in the neighborhood, and then she gets blamed for it. Supposedly from this trial going forward, this kind of changed a lot of the rules with like how they handle murders or something like that.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the basic premise of it, and it's pretty trippy. Yeah, like I would recommend it, Candy. I think you guys would like it.
I thought you were
okay.
gonna say The Umbrella Academy because it
Oh.
was written by the singer of My Chemical Romance. Like he
No
did the
way.
graphic novel. Yeah.
Gerard?
Yeah.
What?
Before
Okay.
he was in My Chemical Romance, he was like an artist in LA or not LA, in New York, and like their first album's actually about like 9/11.
No way. Wow.
Yeah.
Holy crap. Yeah, I knew he was an artist, but I didn't realize that he did like a comic, and then they based that show off of the comic.
Yeah.
Or the graphic novel.
Yes.
Yeah, I've heard of it, and it's kind of like a dark fantasy type of show, right?
Like
From what it looked
dark superhero kind of thing. Yeah.
Superhero. Okay. It's notable because it had Ellen at the time.
Yes.
So Elliot transitioned during the course of this show,
Mhm.
right? Like in between seasons.
Yes.
So are they going to work that into the story, or how's that going to work?
From what I've heard, they did work it into the story. I haven't seen the new
Really?
season, so I don't know like how it plays out, but from everything I've heard, they did a pretty good job of working that into the story.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Last thing I wanted to see if I'll just throw this at you really quick before we jump in. Did you see that Worst Roommate Ever TV show on Netflix?
No.
So this is also like a thriller. I was trying to see if you would be knowledgeable about these because, you know, listening to your podcast, every time they bring up something, you're like, oh, I know this one. I know that one.
Yeah.
But Worst Roommate Ever, it's about this lady, Dorothea Puente.
Oh yeah, she was born
She's
in
from
Redlands.
Redlands.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
So
do
she's
know
like
her.
this psycho lady that she would
Uh-huh.
like rent out rooms or whatever to people, and then she would kill
Elderly
them.
people.
Yeah, she would take advantage of them. She would like milk them dry, and then
Mhm.
she would kill them. It was crazy. And then she would
still
just bounce
collect
around.
she would still collect their checks because nobody knew they were dead. And she buried them in her garden and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what the Worst Roommate Ever is about. And
And this all
yeah,
took
so
place in Redlands? Or she was just from Redlands?
she's from Redlands, but I think it's around Southern California, right?
Interesting.
I think it's around San Francisco, actually.
Oh, okay.
I think it's Northern California. But yeah, she was born in Redlands.
That's where all the cycles are, honestly. You know, like Zodiac Killer.
Oh yeah.
Didn't Zodiac Killer actually come down to Redlands?
Riverside. Yeah, there's one killing that hasn't like definitively been connected to him, but it happened at I think RCC, but I'm not 100% sure.
That's
And
crazy.
actually the premiere of the Zodiac movie, they did it at the Kokorian in Redlands,
I
and the
heard that, yeah.
director was there, and the one survivor of him, he was there because he lives in Rancho Cucamonga, the survivor.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I remember at the last scene of the movie Zodiac, they meet at I think it's Ontario, at the airport there in Ontario, and that I remember just being kind of tripped out on the fact that
It's so close.
That's where exactly. That's where they met him. And at the time I was living in Connecticut, so I was like, oh shit, that's weird.
I know that place.
I know that place really well.
Yeah.
But yeah, trippy.
Are we mobbing it?
Let's mob it.
How you doing, everybody? Welcome to Aflixionados podcast, episode Sweet 16. My name is Eric, and the other voices occupying your head this time are a man of many trades, good friend, colleague, and co-host Michael.
How do you do?
And we're also joined by a very special guest this time. She is one of the co-hosts of the hugely popular podcast that covers all things paranormal, true crime, urban legends, and interesting history. That's right, folks. We're, of course, talking about the hit series Dark Chatter. Please join me in welcoming today's guest, my friend, Nicole.
Hello.
Thank you to all the listeners out there for joining us. Available on all major podcast streaming services, with new episodes dropping on the first Saturday of each month, 5 a.m. Pacific. Aflixionados is a monthly podcast where we primarily talk about films that range from mind-numbing to mind-blowing. We may also cover TV shows or other forms of media. We will be getting into spoilers here, and there will be only the healthiest amount of expletives tossed in. You have been warned. Now, if you ain't ready, then get ready, because in today's episode, we will be discussing the murder mystery thriller Se7en. It would have been so awesome if we could have recorded this on 7/7. That's actually what I was kind of aiming for, but you know, it is what it is. It's just a number. Retiring law enforcement detective Lieutenant William Somerset is abruptly partnered with short-tempered but idealistic detective David Mills, who both hunt a serial killer that uses the 7 deadly sins as his motives. As of this recording, I actually watched Se7en on Netflix, so it's available there to those that are interested, those that are listening to the podcast. I don't know if it's going to be there by the time this goes live, but as of this recording, yeah, it's on Netflix. I had a couple interesting facts about the movie, and I want to see what your guys' thoughts were on these. Writer Andrew Kevin Walker was first inspired to create the screenplay after visiting New York City and originally envisioned the Somerset character to be played by William Hurt. Do you guys know who William Hurt is?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Altered States.
Maybe if I saw his face.
He's actually a great actor. The one I remember fondly with him is, man, what was it? The one with Kevin Costner that I think I suggested to you, Michael.
Yeah,
before.
yeah, you did. The wow, what the heck is that?
I don't know why the title's slipping my mind right now, but that's also the one with Dane Cook in it. Do you know what I'm talking about, Nicole?
Dane Cook? No.
Dane Cook, yeah, in a serious role.
What? I didn't know he could be serious.
Oh, Mr. Brooks. Man, how did I forget Mr. Brooks?
Mr. Brooks.
Okay.
But that's a great movie. And he kind of plays the main character's alter ego. So the main character is Kevin Costner, and William Hurt is his alter ego. So that's kind of like the devil on his shoulder. That's always like, he's like, come on, man, just do it. Just kill him. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that would be an interesting performance to see, because William Hurt is
he's super charismatic in that movie.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, he tends to be more just like calming, his voice.
He's actually super calm in that movie, but I almost feel like that's what makes it so chilling, is that he's just like so calm and emotionless about these calculated about these murders. But obviously because he's like a figment of his imagination. But Al Pacino was actually considered for the Somerset role early on, but he declined so he could make City Hall instead,
which, as we all know, is a hit.
I've never seen it. Yeah, so I couldn't tell you. And Denzel Washington and Sylvester Stallone both turned down the roles of Mills. So that would have been a really different movie, I feel like.
Seriously.
Oh, man. Yeah, definitely. This was...
For better, for worse, I don't know. But it's like, I think Denzel has gone on record to say that he actually regretted turning down the role for Se7en.
Yeah. I think the way I think about it, I don't know. Morgan Freeman just played it so well, so even keel, even if Denzel's interpretation were... Well,
Denzel would have played Mills, not Somerset.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, so that would have been way different, right?
Very different.
Oh, yes.
Very different.
Yes, definitely.
Also wanted to say, New Line Cinema allegedly changed the ending of the movie to be a more action-oriented, I guess to be more in line with other detective thrillers around that time, but director David Fincher I guess he read the older script by accident, and he then accepted the directing role based off of the old script. And so when New Line was like, well, that's actually not what we want to do, he's like, well, sorry, this is what I'm doing. So it actually reverted, and then, well, it changed and then reverted back. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
That is interesting.
I wonder what action-oriented ending they would have gone with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know.
And one last fact. Se7en, the film ended up being the 7th highest grossing film of 1995. So, you know how that was kind of going with my saying was like, that would have been cool if we record on 7/7.
On 7.
And it was also the 7th highest grossing film. So actually, I was like, wait, that can't be right. So you pull up highest grossing movies of 1995, and Se7en is right there at spot number 7.
Interesting.
What was your guys' initial thoughts on the movie, having revisited the movie? You got to go in with like a more matured mindset.
Yeah, the first time I saw it, I was probably too young to be watching a movie like that. But that's mostly been my life. So, but maybe that's why I'm so messed up. But I remember liking it as a child, even though I was messed up. But I like how dark it is. It definitely makes you feel kind of gross because like all the environments that they're in are like grungy and like dingy and dark and just like a place that you don't want to be. Like almost every single place they visit. Like obviously the Greed and everything and Pride, those are cleaner places. But pretty much every other place is dark and gross and dingy. Like even Mill's apartment is just like still kind of gross. And I'm like, ooh, like how do they live there? It's kind of funny because after I rewatched this, right after I started watching Mindhunter, which is the same director, David Fincher, and I didn't even notice. And my boyfriend was like, isn't this the same guy that directed Se7en? And I was like, oh, that's so weird. I'm like, probably just the vibes. I was like, oh, I want to continue with this vibe.
Yeah, and Mindhunter has that same like really somber and kind of just dreary environment.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I mean, even like the intro, was it the 9 Inch Nails song and everything, like kind of remixed and all that? Like it totally sets the tone for the rest of the movie. It's pretty awesome, I feel like. And I'm kind of in the same vein as you in the fact that I was watching a lot of these kind of a more mature movies, I guess you could say, and really dark in theme early on. And I remember watching Child's Play when I was like 5 years old. I had no idea. Like I wasn't terrified watching it, but I remember thinking like the doll I thought was a little man. I didn't realize that he was supposed to be a toy. So I thought he was just like a, little person. And I was like, why is this little guy so upset? Like, why is he trying to kill all these people? I just didn't understand.
That the soul was transferred.
So that probably messed me up going forward as well. Like I'm like seeing these really like sad and like dark events happen on screen, and I'm just like, wow, I'm just eating it up, absorbing everything like a sponge.
Yeah, same here. When we were kids, my dad had us watching like rated R films all the time, and I remember my mom would get upset with him, or my aunts would get upset with him, and just be like, "You shouldn't be showing these kids these movies." And we're watching. I think I was in 5th grade when it came out, when Se7en came out. So I remember we saw it not long after it did come out. And yeah, I remember it was. You asked before about what we thought now looking at it with mature eyes. And I would say it almost felt like a different movie to me watching it now versus when I saw it when I was younger. And I'd seen parts of it again throughout the years, but never really sat down to watch it from beginning to end. Actually, I remember when I was I went to had a little short stint in film school, and when I went there, I remember breaking down the intro, and it was weird because I've since grown to appreciate 9 Inch Nails. I didn't know I didn't have an appreciation for it back then. It was so unsettling.
I was actually surprised because I'm not into industrial music typically, but or like that grunge, but I was surprised that I recognize that song, right from the beginning, because it doesn't actually have the chorus until the very end of the intro. So up until then, it's just like the instrumentals, right?
Right.
But it's so recognizable. I think that's how prominent of a song that was. It was that even if you weren't into that music, you knew what that song was.
Yes,
right.
definitely.
I was like, This like if it has like this Depeche Mode vibe to it, but I was like, no, it's a little more eerie even. But yeah, just finishing up with what I was saying before about how you were like, what do you think of this now? Yeah, it just felt like the themes were popping out way more, and like Mills's character stood out to me a little bit more. His aggression was so much more evident to me, having seen it already and knowing what how it all kind of unfolds. I thought that was I just appreciated it so much more. I was like enthralled with the movie as I watched it.
Yeah, I almost feel like as you get older, you're kind of less looking at the surface level, and you're kind of looking past that, you know, diving deeper into the scenes now, and you're understanding why these events are happening or why they're acting this way and what they're trying to do. And you're kind of almost thinking like, okay, what's the next step? Where are they going to go from here now?
Right.
I found myself like looking around at the scene, like looking for clues. Like, what are they gonna find? You know, I guess that's just the true crime. Like in me, I'm like, okay, where's the next clue? Like kind of like looking in the background, like not just like what's happening in the scene, but like everything going on in the background, and like looking for other things that I might find.
Did you see Kevin Spacey standing behind the curtain with his shoes peeking at night?
We actually joked about that in our Batman episode.
Oh my God.
He's in every scene. He's in every. He's at every crime scene. The killer.
Yeah, he's like the janitor mopping the floor in the background.
So creepy.
Man, yeah, I have a lot to say about the characters. So I guess we'll start off with Somerset. He's actually the one where it actually opens up with Detective Somerset kind of, he's like in his apartment, right? Getting ready for work or whatever. I feel like his character is like really interesting to me, played by Morgan Freeman, because as he's getting ready for a shift, I feel like he's very old school, kind of by the book, and maybe even over prepared and over organized sometimes. Like you even get the sense that he's not very liked by some of his peers, because when he shows up at the first crime scene, they're just like, oh God, like, what kind of bullshit do you have to complain about now? Because you have him asking these questions, right? Like Somerset's like, oh,
was the kid in the room? Did the child see it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he was just like, what the hell does it matter if the kid was in the room? You know, like, I can't wait until you're gone.
Yeah.
But the thing is, because he's a detective,
Right.
They're just cops. They don't know the questions to ask. And like, he's a good detective. He knew right off the bat what was happening first time he saw it. He's a seasoned detective. He knows what questions to ask to get the case solved. Like, these are just regular cops. They don't know what questions to ask.
In fact, it almost seems like a reaction like that. Of course, watching it now again, just having a different mindset, watching the behavior on screen. So I'm like, oh, it's not that he's weird. That's just how that cop feels about him, and that says more about that cop than it does about him and why that cop is working that beat and why he's not a detective.
Right, and they're probably jealous.
Precisely, they're jealous, and because he's in a way, because he is such an enigma, because he you can't, he's a hard person to understand, but they're also not very curious. They're not asking him, what did you see there? Or why are you doing that? They're not inquisitive. They're just like, they're so definitively, in some ways, like Mills, you know, just like, God, you know, you're so weird.
Well, he's known for wanting to work by himself, because I almost feel like he thinks that other people just kind of slow him down. He solves these crimes on his own, and he has his own method. And a lot of people, they don't understand it. They think that his methods aren't effective, because he even says, I think later on in the movie, Somerset is talking about how a lot, if not like most of his cases, were never solved. He's like, all we do is we collect evidence, we box it up, and then we sometimes go back to it if there's a trial. More often than not, it just sits on the shelf, collects dust, and we never see it again. Mm-hmm. Cold case, right?
Wow.
And he's also very somber as well. Like, he's not very pleasant to be around.
It could be the job.
It could be, yeah.
Right.
He's worn down.
He seems that way, right? And that's something that I think is evident that in a comment that he makes to Mills when he says, "I just never seen it done that way before." Where Mills actually came from the countryside, from upstate, or I don't know if it was upstate, but he came from the countryside to work in the city, in the inner city.
Definitely wasn't as busy as that city, for sure, because I think he alludes to the fact that he came from like out of town or whatever, and Somerset immediately says like, "Yeah, but you don't know how things run around here. This is a whole nother ballgame. You may have been a big fish in a small pond, but now you're a small fish in a big pond."
Right.
Man, I want to get into Detective Mills now. After you see how Somerset is and how he treats everything and how people kind of react to him, then you got Detective Mills that comes in, played by Brad Pitt. And the initial dynamic between the two main characters I thought was pretty interesting, because you do have like that young up and comer, you know, and then you got the guy that's like the grizzled old veteran that's like really bitter on his way out. Yeah, they got very different ideas and attitudes.
Yes, definitely. Like almost polar opposites. Mills is very like eager, and Somerset's just like, let's get this over with.
Yeah, you really get the sense he really is broken.
And he's not really interested in the case. Like, he obviously, you know, with that first murder, you don't automatically assume it's going to be a serial killer. So he's just like, yeah, you know, my focus is just on this one. Once I'm done with this, I'm out of here, you know, by the end of the week. And I guess, you know, that's another thing. He has 7 days before he's gone. So
right.
there you go, 7 again.
Yep.
But yeah, and then Mills is coming in and he's kind of gonna fill that void once Somerset is gone. And Mills is just like, he just has like that upbeat attitude, and he's more optimistic for sure about everything because he's naive.
He's optimistic, right? But he's like a shoot first and aim second kind of person, where he's just, okay, where do I turn my anger? This guy's a jerk, blah blah blah. Like let's just go gung ho.
Yeah, he's very reactive.
Very reactive, right? Versus the methodical way that Somerset approaches things, and it's. It's so indicative of I mean, the scene in the library is indicative of the kind of person that Somerset is, where and we can, I don't know if I didn't check the notes if you were going to talk about that scene in the library at all, but I really loved that scene as a kid. And I remember I loved it even when I went back and kind of cut it up a little bit for class, but it was, he loves to be alone. Like you said before, he likes to dive into the minds of other people. That's why he likes reading books. It's just him and the author. Or authors, as he compiles all this.
But you know, he has like another weird thing about him, Somerset. I'm talking about is that he like goes to sleep with a metronome. Like that's like the white noise almost that he uses to go to sleep. He just like click, 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 and then that's how he goes to sleep. And everything's really routine to him. You know, it's very structured.
Yes, definitely.
Very structured. Yeah. Like he needs a.
Maybe he needs that because of all the chaos that he deals with every day. Like he needs some kind of like serenity, some kind of stability, something he can depend on to be very regular, as opposed to you don't know what you're going to be walking into every day you walk into work.
Something to keep him grounded.
Yeah.
Do you think in some way he might be a little OCD? Like he really wants things to be a certain way. Otherwise, like it's not going to go right.
In some ways, yes. I don't think so, though. No, because he feels comfortable in the chaos. I don't see him trying to bring order per se. I think he's always trying to understand the mind of the individual, whether it's, again, reading a book or whether it's reading a crime scene. He's very interested in trying to understand that person without imposing himself on the scene, versus Mills's approach, who is very like, you know, obviously like a bull in a china store, just running through and causing all sorts of...
You can definitely see Mills walking in and he's like bumping stuff over, like, oh, whoops, I didn't mean to touch that.
Right.
Because like with that first crime scene, he actually gets kicked out of the crime scene, right? So Somerset's like, can you just leave? I got this. Don't worry about it. That was definitely disrespectful. Mills didn't take that lightly at all.
Well, it could, right, but that was Mills's interpretation of those actions. I don't think that Somerset intended it to be taken as disrespectful. It was just Somerset, I think, is used to doing things by himself, and because he could tell that Mills was overcompensating for how green he is. You know, he just was stammering, talking about this and that and the other thing. It had nothing to do with anything that was going on in the crime scene. He wasn't asking questions. He wasn't getting a feel for it. He was just trying to talk about how, you know, things that they did back the way they did it before.
A lot of it is like, it's almost like he's just trying to break the tension and maybe just build rapport. You get the sense that he really wants to be liked by Somerset, but
Precisely.
Somerset's just so freaking annoyed by him. He's just like, can you just leave? Like, I don't want to hear you talk anymore. I guess to Somerset, Mills is just talking for the sake of talking. Like, he's not really helping or doing anything.
I think he understands that because he's somebody that empathizes really well, which is why he gets along so well with Mills's wife. He asks questions. He understands. That's why he cracks up at the shaking of the house and of the apartment when the train goes by. He really he gets people, and I think he just doesn't want to have to go through. He doesn't want to have to hold this guy's hand. He knows what this guy's doing. He knows that Mills is trying to get him to like him. He doesn't give a shit though. He's just like, I got to do this thing. I don't give a shit about making you feel comfortable right now. He tried. It's not that as though he didn't try, because in the first scene he does tell, or not, maybe it's like the second scene, but when they first meet, he tells him, yeah, I was thinking we could go in and have a cup of coffee or have a drink or whatever and catch up and I could fill you in. And Mills is like, no, let's just do it. Let's just go in there, you know? And he's like, all right. But so again, it was really who rebuffed who at the beginning. But I don't think it was necessarily intended to be like, screw you, you know, you shined me on at the beginning, I'm going to shine you on now. Not vindictive. It was more just, I have a job to do and you're obviously not as engaged in this work right now. So I'm just going to get you out of here before you mess shit up.
He's also probably like, what's the point? I'm going to be gone in 7 days anyways. Like, why should I even
build
get
a
to know
relationship?
this guy? Right.
Why even build a relationship? But also, as I said before, how Mills was, he's very much, again, like reactive. And so are these other cops that off the beat that Somerset has had to deal with. So I think that maybe there is some sort of, maybe he's seeing in him the way that he's been treated in the past. And it's just like, look, I just don't want to.
You know what? He's probably
this.
seen it time and time again where you got these young guys coming in and they're really passionate. And then just over time, they get broken down. Even in some way, I want to say that Somerset probably started out that way. And then now he really fully understands how the city works. And he's just like, listen, happiness just dies here. This is a vacuum, you know, and it'll suck all the life out of you. There's no point in trying to hold on to it. And he's just really depressed about pretty much everything.
Yeah. But then when he tells the story later, when he's speaking with the wife, like you kind of like see maybe he could have been different in the past. Mm-hmm. And then this event kind of changed him and kind of made him want to like distance himself from like relationships at all. That's kind of,
he didn't want to go through that pain again.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. So he's like, why get to know anybody? It's just going to end in pain kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. That's a pretty sad and lonely mindset, right? Is like, you don't want to create any relationships or get to know anyone because there's no telling how long you're going to be around. Especially in their line of work, it's so dangerous that you could die tomorrow or that person could die tomorrow. And then you're just like, well, there you go. And now my heart's broken again. Right. I could have avoided that if I just kept to myself and didn't get to know this person.
Right. It's a coping mechanism. He's found a way to deal with it.
Going into the first victim, who will become one of many in a series. So the morbidly obese man, bound by his wrists and ankles, found dead face first in a bowl of spaghetti, representing gluttony. So what do you guys think of this crime scene?
It was so disgusting.
Yeah, it's one of the,
They definitely turned up the gross factor on this one. I don't think they could do much. The way it was set up, even the lighting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or the lack of lighting, the roaches, which, by the way, they actually did let loose a bunch of roaches. And apparently they were getting all over the place. So that was like probably one of the worst scenes to film.
That's disgusting. Oh man. But yeah, it was funny because I was faced with these two opposing feelings. On the one hand, I was grossed out, but I had already kind of anticipated that because I remember seeing it as a kid. And just as a kid, I don't even think I really remembered many of the other scenes as well as I did this because it was so fucking disgusting and horrible.
Right out the gate, you know, this is the very first one.
Yeah, just him and the wife beater and then the barbed wire on his ankles and just all this. It was over the top. So I was faced with that one feeling of this grotesque, but then I was reveling in the 90s. On the other hand, I was like, they don't make movies like this anymore. Not this way, you know, this feeling. And I was like, oh, disgusting. But this feels, it feels so familiar at the same time. Right. They nailed it. Yeah. It felt so good. Right. I was like, oh God, this is delicious.
You want to feel something and you want to feel like you're there. And like, if you were there, you'd be so disgusted. Oh, I don't want to touch anything. When I go in a public bathroom, like touch as little as possible. Everything's disgusting, you know, but it's even worse. It's like 10 times worse. Like just don't touch anything, get in and get out. But you literally have to be digging through things, looking for clues and stuff. It's just gross.
Oh man. And then the coup de grace when they lift his head up. Oh like just God. You thought it couldn't get any worse. Like it's disgusting. Yeah, maggots and his eyes are, you know, he's got cataracts or whatever you would call that. His eyes are gray and his mouth is agape, and just like, yeah, he's dead. And that's like, I think when that scene ends, is they should pull it up like, yeah.
Well, it's funny
dead.
because I think, wasn't it Somerset again that's like, is he dead? And I think the cops were like, well, he's been sitting there for a couple hours, you know, I think he's dead. But he's like, but did you check his vitals? And so I think that's when Mills actually checks on him and confirms that he is dead.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that seems like a simple question, but, you know, that's kind of an important thing. That's something that they actually miss in one of the later.
Right, exactly.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
They just show up and assume like, oh, the guy must be
Assumptions.
dead.
Mhm.
Yep.
Really quick on that bathroom mention. We've all been in a bathroom that looks like it's from like a Saw movie.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like we walk in, it's like the flickering light. I see like a dead body in the corner, and I just like step over him to get to the urinal really quick, and don't want to touch anything. Business. Flush with the foot, you know, like, and then just
like gas station bathrooms.
Yeah, gas. Yeah. Those are the ones. Those are the ones.
That's it. I was slowing down the scene, and you probably were too, Nicole, but I was like kind of like looking around the stuff in the apartment, and man, this apartment was actually well stocked. I don't know if this was because this guy actually just ate this much, or was it the murderer that really stocked this this apartment so that way he didn't have to go very far? Because I mean, wasn't there even a shopping list or like a grocery bag or something nearby that they found?
Yeah, I think that they alluded to the fact that they suspected the killer had been making runs to the grocery store.
Because this guy was eating so much, he's like, well, I didn't bring enough food, so I gotta go get some more.
Right.
I'm almost thinking like Simpsons, like how he's in hell and the devil keeps feeding him donuts and he's just like, oh, like getting fatter, but he's like, oh, no, happily doing it.
The one thing I can think, okay, so this guy's consuming all this food, and all I can think in my mind is, if I'm this dude and I'm eating all this food, I'm only hoping that eventually this guy will stop making me eat this food, so I'll just keep eating this food. And so right, so it makes me wonder, like, and in other scenes, other of these murders, I think to myself, wouldn't it have just been better to get a bullet through the head?
Exactly.
It would have just been so. I would have just, if he had a gun to my head and said, "Do this thing," I would have been like, "No, fuck you, pull the trigger." But I guess that's looking at it from one perspective. Another would be, well, perhaps these people are under the assumption, maybe this guy's given them some false hope that
might let you go,
that he'll let you go, right? And that this is just a momentary thing that you have to deal with.
Damn, like eat 5 spaghetti cans and I'll let you go type of thing. And then he just keeps adding like 5 more.
But it's interesting to get into the psychology of the person who's the victim, because maybe that was never said. Maybe this was just an assumption on their part that, oh God, if I just do this thing, he'll just leave me. He'll stop. He'll leave me alone.
I would want a bullet in the head if I had to live in that apartment.
Yeah.
So I just feel like, fine, just end it.
Yeah. Oh, good. Someone's here. Good. I'm just living in filth. Just do it for me. Thanks. I'm not a happy person.
Right.
I'm probably assuming that a lot of it was probably already gross to begin with, but I feel like it has to have been because he had been there for such a long period of time without cleaning, right? He could have been a slob partially as well, but it could have also been the fact that there's just all this food and excrements all over the place, you know, and then like the bugs just kind of moved in.
Well, the grime was just like thick. It was too like lived in.
It was too lived in, and also they made mention of the fact that he had only been at that plate for 45 minutes before they found his body.
Really? Okay.
So yeah, so I was like 45 minutes. So there's no way that place got to be that fucking filthy without
in a day
having taken time.
Jeez. Okay. So that guy was just disgusting to begin with.
He was, but then God. Just discussing this makes me think of the fact that the killer is not so different, in fact, than Mills. As intelligent as in a weird way, he kind of embodies both characters, where he's methodical like Morgan Freeman, like Somerset, but he's also got this very idealistic way of looking at the world, in the sense that, and I say idealistic, but I mean he's got a certain ideal, which is that we should be living a certain way. So he's imposing his own beliefs on these people, because and so he's like, oh yeah, screw this guy, he ate himself to death. But the real question is that what happened? This guy really did to himself? Did he really kill himself? So all these crimes, I'm like, they didn't kill themselves? And I can get I'll get to that part, what I mean about this later. It comes up at the very, very end. But I was thinking, man, climb in this guy's shoes and live in this heavyset man's life for a day, and imagine hating yourself the way he must have hated himself, and to go back to that dingy ass terrible apartment. And we could say he's a total slob, but it's like, are we born slobs? He was somebody's kid before, and he just who knows how he began to feel about himself in this state. And so it's like the serial killer, all he saw was a fat man and just disgusted him. And so immediately he's just like,
they even alluded to the fact that he was a shut-in, right? Like he didn't go outside very often, and obviously he didn't clean. So maybe he saw this guy and he was like, he can't even fit out the door. He probably doesn't leave because he's just so fat and he doesn't move around. He just sits down all day long or whatever. And so I don't know, maybe that was also an easy target because he was so alone. Like no one really cared about him, and he didn't have any friends that were going to check on him. So he could do whatever he wanted for however long he wanted to.
He's obviously very depressed. If he lives in a place like that, he probably eats his feelings. He's a shut-in. Like it just kind of shows you, like, don't judge a book by its cover. Like, kind of, you don't know what other people are living. Like, you don't know, like, what kind of day they're having or anything. So for him to just assume, like, oh, he's just gluttonous, he's eating his feelings, he's making up for, you know, maybe not having relationships or something like that. You know, like, this man's obviously very depressed to be living this way.
It's not even revealed until a little bit later, right? When the coroner or the pathologist, I guess, reveals that he didn't die from like choking on the food or anything, but it was like a mixture of like he had his stomach burst from stretching so far.
Yeah.
And so he had like internal hemorrhaging. And I don't know, I was a little kind of skeptical about the bruise thing, like how they said there's this tiny bruise on the back of his head and that was most likely a gun. And so everyone just kind of ran with that idea. Like they knew for a fact that like, yep, he was forced to do it at gunpoint, this and that. I was like, I mean, there wasn't enough evidence there for me anyway.
I mean, it could have been anything, but he could have told him it was a gun. Yeah, like it could be like that whole, like when old movies, a bank robber would come in with his hand in his pocket and pretend like he had a gun, you know, like it could be anything.
Yeah, see, I'll plug you.
Yeah.
Open the door. Give me the cash.
Was it the Atlantic accent or whatever?
Yeah, transatlantic. Yeah.
Fun fact about that corner scene as well was that because it was so uncomfortable to be in this fat suit, that apparently the director wanted to make the fat suit well endowed, so at least that way he would have some sort of something to kind of brag about, like in this role, because mostly he's playing dead.
Oh my god!
So it's like
such a man thing.
I know you're sweating in the suit, so here you go.
But dude, you're hung.
Oh,
It's funny because Somerset already has the foresight. He's like, uh-oh, I see where this is going. I don't like this. Like he kind of has this gut feeling about these murder scenes. So he's like, okay. So he's trying to explain it to the captain, and that's Arlie Ermy as the captain, I believe.
Yeah.
And so he's explaining to the captain that he's like, listen, I don't want to be involved in this. I'm telling you, this is going to be like a series of murders, and I don't want to be dragged into this. I'm done by the end of the week. Just give this to someone else. But don't give it to Mills, because I don't think Mills is ready for it, but give it to someone else. And so Mills is, he's like trying to fight for it. And the captain actually tells him that, no, you're going to stay on it, and I'll reassign Mills since you guys aren't getting along. Mills thinks he's more than ready for it, and Somerset wants to get rid of it, but he also doesn't want to give it to Mills. And he's kind of protecting him in a way, even though he doesn't really know this guy and he doesn't really like this guy.
Yeah. He again, him saying, I've never seen it done that way. He reiterated that 2 or 3 times. He's like, what do you mean? And he's like, he's like, I get what you're saying. I've just never seen it done that way, where somebody moves to the inner city as opposed to retiring, leaving the inner city, going and just kind of like going off into the pasture, being put out to pasture.
Yeah, he's like, why would you want this? Why would you ask for this?
And it makes sense in light of the fact that Mills is kind of ambitious, right? So it's like, I think of it in the sense that, psychologists, when they go through school, they will deal with some of the most crazy cases, right? They'll deal with criminally insane people.
Kind of what Mindhunter is about, where the whole concept of Mindhunter, how we were talking about before, was instead of just incarcerating these people, they want to understand why they're doing these things. They want to understand the psychology of it.
It's so iterative, right? To get better at something, you have to do more of it. And he has no shortage of cases that are going to be coming up that he can learn from Mills. And so by doing this, he can move up the ladder more quickly and get more experience if you think about it, because he is so impetuous. He wants it right now.
He wants to prove himself.
Wants to prove
I think
himself.
right out the gate, he wants to be like the hot shot. Like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to solve this case, and everyone's going to be impressed.
Right. But he just thinks that he's so capable. He doesn't see, he hasn't been humbled yet by the years like Somerset has been, where Somerset instead kind of goes in more inquisitively and wants to see what's there to be seen and see it for what it is. Instead, Mills goes in and immediately interprets it as like, no, this guy's a fucking whack job. He's this person. He's that. I bet he's, he comes up with all these assumptions.
Conclusions.
Right. Precisely. And so, yeah, I don't know.
The next day, sure enough, there's another victim, and the seemingly wealthy guy is killed in his law firm office, and the blood is used to write out greed in the carpet. So what do you guys think of this crime scene?
It's very flashy.
I almost feel like they glossed over it. And at first I was a little upset by the fact that I'm like, man, this seems like really just like they didn't let you study the scene as much as they did for Gluttony.
They didn't. Well, I feel like as the movie progresses, you get less and less time with the crime scene and the victim.
And I think initially the reason why I was kind of upset was because, it seems very just like in your face. Like as soon as you walk in, you see greed first before you even see the victim, right? Because the victim's like,
right.
Isn't he like hogtied like towards the back of the room? And then like there's like the blood that leads to the word greed. And then you got like Mills just like freaking, he's all super comfortable, like sitting at the desk, spinning around the chair and everything, barely kind of paying attention while CSI is kind of doing their thing.
Yeah, that was giving me anxiety. I'm like, stop touching everything.
Exactly. He's just like, oh, what's this pen do? Oh, it writes. Sweet. But what's cool is later on, they actually do go back and they pull up more evidence from this. But I think it's not until Somerset, he's like kind of given those little shavings, and then he's prompted to go revisit that grungy apartment. And then, he's kind of like taking a closer look and is like, where did these shavings come from? Because this was in the guy's mouth or throat or something like that. There was like pieces carved from the floor or something, right?
The linoleum, yeah.
Yeah. He was like, wait, this refrigerator was pulled out and it tore up like 2 little strips from the linoleum. He pulls out the fridge, and that's where he sees Gluttony behind her.
Yep.
At least that one was a little bit more like you had to do some detective work, whereas Greed for me was like, bam, served on the silver platter for you.
But maybe he did that because they didn't find the Gluttony in the first one. So he wanted to make them revisit it and like actually connect them.
Maybe he thought they were idiots, and he's like, oh, these guys aren't getting it. And it's almost like it's not as satisfying if they're not playing along, because they're just like so dumb that you're like, okay, I'm going to have to like hold your hand through this thing.
Yep.
I think this is when Somerset kind of goes over for dinner, right? To Mills's apartment. Doesn't Mills's wife invite him over? I think Somerset inherently just manages to start helping Mills with his case, because Somerset is assigned to Gluttony. Mills is on Greed, but Mills isn't getting anywhere. He has like all these photographs and everything, and Somerset's just kind of like glossing over him. I guess there needed to be one detail to focus on. And of course, that happens to be the very last photo in the giant, like 100 photo stack that he's looking through. It has like the blood circles around this lady's eyes.
The wife's eyes, yeah.
The wife, that's right. They end up having to track her down, question her, and they're showing her the photos. Do you see anything strange? She's like, no. Like, I mean, that's kind of a messed up situation to be in, because you have to look at these pictures and they're trying to cover them up as much as possible, but you also need her to be able to see most of the photo, to be able to identify anything strange. And I thought this part was genius. This is what made me like the Greed murder scene even more so than Gluttony, was because she was like, wait, that painting is upside down. And he's like, what do you mean? Because if you look at it, it's an abstract painting. Someone that's like not really into art, you'll look at it and it's just a bunch of like colors and splots all over the place. But and also art, people interpret it differently, right? Especially if it's abstract. Right. So who's to say it was upside down? But she only knew it being hung a certain way, and she was like, wait, that's upside down. The cops were all through that office, and they're like, I didn't see anything upside down. But sure enough, it was this photo that was flipped, and only people that were around it would identify that. So I thought that was a pretty cool way of like sneaking a clue in there without anyone noticing.
The only thing I thought was kind of like didn't make sense in this, and maybe it's me just being like stereotypical, is if this guy was so greedy, a lot of guys that are very greedy and all about their work do not pay much attention to their wives. So I just thought it was kind of like interesting that she would even know that that was upside down. Like, guys like this don't want their wives to even have any kind of part in the business. Would she have even gone to his office much to realize that that painting was upside down? Maybe it's just I've watched too much Criminal Minds, and that's like pretty much like they're very like stereotypical, like, oh, this is a rich man, he doesn't have anything to do with his wife, he cheats on her all the time. That goes hand in hand more so with greed, but I guess they needed to kind of like have some clue to be found.
Also, at the same time, like how you're saying, was he really a deserving victim? Because maybe he just seemed greedy from an outside point of view.
Right.
We don't know how he was before he died because we only know him at his death.
Yeah, I was also wondering how the killer came across all these different people who were in different like walks of life, and how these particular people caught his eye as one of the deadly sins, like how he came across all of them. I feel like it could have been dug a little more deeply into, but I'm not going to give too much away, I guess, because it kind of at the end.
Yeah, I think that's part of the mystery to it as well, is that you don't really know like what it is this guy's thinking and why is he targeting these specific people. How did he even meet them? A lot of it, I think the planning, they said multiple times, took years. Like, it took a long time. He's taking heavy notes, and he's writing in several journals, but like they're in no particular order. You know, it's almost like he's just writing things down, but he doesn't ever plan on reading it. He's just kind of needing to like document it in some way. And then, you know, he just like throws in another pile and never reads it again. Why does he even need to write it down in the first place?
Maybe he's a visual person, though, and he needs to write it down to keep it in his head.
Or to get it from out of his head onto paper, because it's almost like maybe it torments him otherwise. And the thing too is, you know, they want to be known, like you're saying. Here he is leaving these clues. Of course, he didn't have to do any of that stuff. It's part of the game, though. He wants to be understood, and so in no particular order, you know, he's writing these thoughts down, or at least he's not. I don't think it really matters to him much what order you read it in, so much as you just do read it and understand it, and he revels in it, right? I mean, he at the very end he talks about how his case will be studied for generations.
I imagine it would, because I just felt like it was so methodical and so devious that probably was something that police department was going to talk about. I mean, if nothing else, the individual cops that were involved in it are probably going to be like, man, I was on this crazy case. You have no idea what happened.
Right, but it's ironic that he kills somebody for pride, saying that they are pride, that they are the embodiment of it in his mind's eye, and yet he is full of hubris to think that he would be so important that he's got to document all this shit in these composition books, that somebody's going to give a shit about anything he ever wrote. You know what I mean?
And that it's up to him to carry out this punishment on these people.
Isn't it?
The judgment.
Precisely. I think it's so funny that the things that we hate in others, we often don't realize are in ourselves.
You embody. Yeah.
We don't know. We don't realize it, that we don't like the things that we don't like are either the things that we choose not to see or the things that we have yet to accept in us. And he's just proving the point.
Yeah, definitely. And he was thinking on a different plane. Like, he could have been so intelligent. And I think I've mentioned this with Brenda several times. Is like, it's crazy how you can be so smart, and then once you reach this threshold of intelligence, you almost start just like going off the deep end. And then you start just like going into like crazy territory. Now you start looking past all this facade that everyone else is living in, and you're kind of living in your own world.
Precisely. If you're living in your own world, that means that you're thinking about your own thoughts, and you're no longer thinking about reality. You're not actually seeing reality and taking it for exactly what it is. You're thinking about thinking. And so of course it eventually goes off into like this fantasy, you eventually go off into your own little world.
But maybe it's also like crazy genius, but you don't have anybody else to bounce your thoughts off of that are on the same level as you. So these thoughts are just your own thoughts, and you don't it doesn't become a conversation. It's a conversation with yourself. So obviously you're gonna go crazy because you don't have anybody to, you know, bring you back to reality or tell you, no, this is a crazy idea. Because how many times have you thought like, oh, I'm going to do this, and then you tell somebody else and they're like, are you serious? And then they talk you back down to reality and you're like, yeah, you're right, I was crazy, or whatever, you know. But like, they have to be on the same level as you or see their perspective of your thought, but you don't have that. You only have yourself.
Did they have to end up doing that for you on Dark Chatter?
Maybe. Like, me and Megan go off on tangents all the time, and Jessica's like, okay guys, like, even on the episodes that Jess isn't on the episode, we're like, oh, it'll be a shorter episode because there's only 2 of us. Oh no, it's way longer because there's nobody to bring us back to the tracks we're supposed to stay on.
I don't think sometimes it's like we never start on the tracks, so we just kept going down the hill and see where it took us. But I wanted to say I also like the little swerve with the greed crime scene, because after she points out that the painting is upside down, they immediately head back and they're like, oh, cool, there's something in the painting. That's like their first thought. And I think that was my first thought too. I was like, what's in the painting? And, they're like searching it and there's nothing on here. And he cuts it open. And it was kind of weird that Mills was kind of freaked out that he had a knife. He was like, what's that? And he was like, butterfly knife.
I know. I thought that was weird too. Like,
I was like, okay, like, it's a knife. Relax.
It's like a reasonable knife to have in your pocket. It's not like he pulled out a butcher's knife or something.
Right.
Although that would have been awesome.
That would have been hilarious. Just shh. Hold on a second. Let me just.
Right.
But here's the thing though. Playing devil's advocate here. Here's Mills that's come from a small town, and maybe has seen other pocket knives before, but a butterfly knife is very specifically for attacking. That's why it's not allowed technically in the state of California. It's a piercing weapon.
I can't state this enough. I mean, Somerset is just always prepared. I mean, even when he opened his trunk, he has like everything organized, and he has some sort of tool or item for every single crime scene. And so sure enough, he has like the tools he needs to be able to like dust for prints immediately, right? He doesn't even need to call in a team. He's always just like, he's like, hold on, I think there's fingerprints here. And he already has the kit on him. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's compact. I did in 7th grade, I studied this guy. I'm trying to think of his first name, last name McDonald, but he's the one who patented the powder itself.
The triad.
The triad.
The McDonald triad. What the serial killers, when they're kids, like the 3 things that happen when they're kids.
They eat at McDonald's.
Oh, interesting.
No, it's like bedwetting, lighting fires, being mean to animals.
Oh, animals, yeah.
Interesting.
I have heard about that.
Oh,
like
and
those 3 things.
And that's him? That's the same guy?
I don't think it's the same guy, but when you said that, I was like, yeah, it could be.
Yeah, he used to do blood. He used to do like blood analysis, all that kind of stuff. Blood splatter analysis. I remember I had to do that actually. Like, anyway, point being though that he made it so it's more effective at grabbing fingerprints, this particular powder, and compact, so that any detective could carry it. And it's just, of course, him being old school, maybe somebody who just is more siloed and just wants to focus on their detective aspect, whatever that may be. Now, a more modern version of a detective would focus more on allowing the crime scene investigators to do their thing and forensics to dust. But
I kind of think of it this way. You go to grade school and you have the people that are like, man, I don't care. I just got a folder and I don't got a pen. I don't have paper or anything. And then you got like the kid that has like the backpack full of books, and this thing looks like it weighs as much as they do. And they got everything. They got 5 pens. They have like a pound of paper on them, you know, and they're always the ones that are like passing it out to like all the classmates, because it's like, oh, I don't have any paper. Can I get one of those?
You need a protractor? I got an extra one.
I also see it as like this, like I used to work for like a private practice doctor's office. So, and I was the office manager. So if something needed to be done, I just did it. A computer needed to be moved, I did it. I was IT, I was payroll, I was HR, I was everything. And then I go work for a bigger company and they're like, oh, this needs to be done. And I'm like, oh, I could do it. And they're like, no, we have to call and put in a ticket and have it done. It'll be done in several days. Right. So he probably is like, I don't want to wait around to call somebody to do this when I could just do it myself and get it done and have the answers that I need right here and right now. That's how I saw it.
That happens to us all the time. Like, people are just moving stuff and more often than not breaking it.
Right.
They'll call in and we'll ask them over the phone, so what changed? And they're like, well, I moved it from here to here and now it's not working. Well, there you go. That's what the problem is.
And your first question is, well, did you turn it on? Did
Mhm.
you turn it off and turn it back on? Unplug it and plug it back in. Oh, it works.
See, you're gonna fit right in,
That's
IT.
IT, right?
Fit right in.
That's all it is, basically. And if that doesn't work, then you just do it again. You just turn off
Do it
again.
again.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, next up we have Sloth. And how about that jump scare?
Oh my God.
That thing,
It got me again.
when I first watched the movie, I shit my pants when that thing happened.
It did get me again. I knew it was coming, but it definitely got me again. And you, Michael, how you said the first scene was like the first crime scene was what you remember. This is the one that I remember from my first time watching it, with all the air fresheners hanging,
Yeah.
all the little trees hanging. That's what I picture when somebody says Seven. I picture this crime scene.
Man, this one was freaking disturbing. It was probably one of the most, yeah, I mean, definitely one of the more memorable ones, but it was so just unsettling. Just like the method he used and the lengths he went to kind of draw this out as much as possible and conceal it as best as he could.
For a year.
This was just, man, this was so evil on many levels.
Truly. And then again, it begs the question, was this person really slothful or because he's forcing this person to live as a sloth. Precisely. Yeah.
Well, they did go over this guy's rap sheet because they ended up going to his house because they thought that he could have been the killer, and they go over his rap sheet and he's just a
the
kind of a
are behind the painting.
Yeah. That's what it is that this guy's fingerprints. And so they go to his apartment and they're like, yeah, look at his rap sheet. And they're like ticking off all these different crimes. Yeah, he has to be. He's done a little bit of everything. He's just terrible. Like, I think he was like abusing children and like just a bunch of different terrible things. So they're like, he has to be the guy. Yeah. So that's how they ended up at his apartment.
I see what you mean. So in a way, it's almost like
it was too good to be true, basically.
Not so much just too good to be true. What I was going to say is more like going back to what I was saying about Sloth and about how he forced him to be slothful in a sense. He killed him because he was a bad person. He did, in a sense, what Dexter does, right? This is this is a person who's done some really shitty things, and
except he puts it on display instead of trying to hide it.
Right, and so he casts judgment on this guy. He's his judge and executioner, and decides this guy needs to die. He's done some terrible shit, and I choose to make him die as Sloth.
But I think he was also like did a lot of like robberies and stuff. So we probably saw him as somebody who wasn't willing to get a job kind of thing. So that could go back to Sloth as well.
I see.
He was just kind of like mooching off other people.
Makes sense. Okay, so it wasn't like it was as just random like that. So he got you. He's a mooch.
Yeah.
Obviously, Somerset and even Mills too, they weren't buying it. Everyone else was convinced that, cool, this is the guy. They didn't question, why would he just touch the wall all behind the painting, make it painfully obvious. But everyone was convinced that this was the guy, and Somerset and Mills are like, I don't know about this. So they show up, they're kind of reluctant, and it's just crazy how strange it looks to have hundreds and hundreds of air fresheners just hanging from the ceiling. And that was just to conceal the smell of this guy that hasn't moved. He's just laying in his bed for like a year.
Decomposing. Can't even imagine the bed sores. Oh my gosh.
Ugh. Oh, he was given, wasn't he given like antibiotics or something like that to prevent the bed sores?
Wow. Okay.
And IVs so that way he wouldn't starve.
Yeah. So he, and the thing is, like, this guy has a long rap sheet because he's getting caught for this and that and this and that. He's obviously not a very intelligent criminal if he's getting caught all the time.
Right.
And also his crimes are not this type of crime. Not on this level. I don't think he killed anybody, or if he did, it was just like something like a bar fight stabbing or something. I don't remember exactly, but it's not he's not a calculated person, so that's why they're like, well, this guy doesn't fit the mold of like how precise all of these crime scenes are. Like, he's just not, he's not on that level.
And what I thought was important to note here too was that this is when we start to kind of see the little chips in Mills, like his armor, because he's really disturbed by this sloth crime scene, and he goes outside and he's really upset and he's pacing back and forth. Somerset's telling him not to get emotionally involved, like keep his cool, and that's when he yells at the photographer.
Yeah, in the stairwell.
Get the hell out of here. And so that was pretty cool. Like, you know, he was like really close to the crime scene, and you don't find out until later that was the killer right there.
Yeah.
I like when they do stuff like that. Just little like Easter eggs here and there.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
or like the directors in every film, or like a random person. You're like, oh my God, I never knew that was so and so, or whatever, you know?
Right.
Just little cameos.
But even more so in this one, shows like how far ahead he is than all of them, because he's literally showing up everywhere, like, and they're all detectives, and they're not like, wait, haven't I seen this guy before? A lot of these guys are known for returning to the scene of the crime. That's what's discussed often. And like,
so is that because they want to just have the satisfaction of seeing everyone's reactions, like they want to see in person?
Makes sense.
they want to see the fallout, but they also want to show that they're smart enough that they can return and not get caught, kind of thing. It's different for
That's
everyone.
ballsy.
Yeah.
Around this time, isn't this where Tracy, who's Gwyneth Paltrow, that's when she wants to talk to Somerset, right? She's not really coping well moving to the city, and so they meet up at this diner.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of Tracy? What do you think of Gwyneth Paltrow's character?
I think she seems very lonely.
I almost felt like she kind of gave me like a Mary Sue type of character. Like she's supposed to be this beautiful, flawless, almost trophy wife type of person for David, but she, you know, she's also super understanding and loving, supporting, and it's almost like she never gets upset, or maybe she just feels like she trying to keep it all together so that way she doesn't affect Mills's, you know, David's work or anything like that. But I don't know, like obviously she feels lonely and she doesn't feel comfortable moving to the city, and she felt like she could confide in Somerset. You know, he seems approachable.
Yeah.
Which is again interesting, because then it seems she's her husband's not approachable for the very reasons of him being so kind of impetuous, you know, so volatile at times.
But did you guys think that Tracy was kind of one-dimensional, or is that just me?
Aren't most female characters one-dimensional?
It wouldn't have taken that much to at least give her like, you know, some extra qualities other than just like, I'm the wife and it sucks being in the city, and that's it.
Right.
Oh, I guess maybe this was adding another layer to it. It's revealed that she's pregnant. Does that make her more valuable to the story?
It just makes her more tragic.
Right, exactly. I mean, more
Like,
tragic.
it just makes her, more helpless, and I don't know. It's just a plot device, as my son would say.
This could also be used to reveal more of Somerset's backstory, because this is where he reveals why he's so bitter. Right?
Plot
It's because
Right.
he split from his wife because she wanted kids and he didn't, and he was just really adamant about that, wouldn't compromise at all, and now he's kind of regretting it. I don't know if it was only because his wife's gone, or that he never had kids, or that he never tried to work things out with her. Now he's just kind of like by himself. He's also lonely himself.
Yeah, he let his life pass him by, pretty much. But then he also tells her if she doesn't want to keep the baby, that she can't tell Mills that she was ever pregnant.
That's true, yeah. Are they implying that David, he actually wants kids? Or because I don't think he's ever mentioned it before, so I think they're just assuming.
Yeah, I guess it would just be an assumption, but she doesn't want it because she already just feels like lonely, and she knows it's all gonna be on her, especially once he like moves up in the ranks, like he's working more and more, because that's how Somerset even gets invited to their house in the first place, is she calls him when he's at work and they get into a fight, and then Somerset takes the phone and kind of like sweet talks her, and then she invites him over.
Oh, so she kept calling because he was just working late. He's always in the office.
Right.
And she's just like, so I'm just checking in. Like, are you still alive? You know?
Yeah.
Give me a call.
And he was kind of being a jerk to her, and then Somerset ended up talking to her.
Even though I really love this movie, it's like, I feel like things surrounding the Tracy character were the weakest part of the movie for me.
I think it's just tough though to pack everything. I mean, I feel like it was so well paced that some of the pacing would have been lost if they had tried to dive more into her character. So I'm like, it's a very fine line to try to make her somebody that you'll miss
with not much screen time.
And she had at that point been in several other movies. I think she may have even been in Great Expectations with Ethan Hawke, which either that year or prior to this coming out.
So were there great expectations for her coming in?
It may have been, but they were actually already engaged at the time, I believe, Brad Pitt and Gwyneth Paltrow, when this movie was being made.
Yep. Fun fact is that I actually really dug the chemistry between Gwyneth Paltrow and Brad Pitt because they were dating around this time. I think they were dating for like a year or two before this movie.
Right. So it was like an excuse to be able to spend more time together, but also to actually capture each other on film and be with each other that way. So maybe that was also a draw for her, even though she had been in other roles before with more speaking parts. But yeah, I think that she's very endearing and yeah, tragic. I mean, the fact that they can convey that kind of tragedy, that you would even say that word, makes it, yeah, they did their job then. Nothing more, nothing less.
Wow. So who was like the biggest star in this movie? Would you say, was it Morgan or was it Brad Pitt? Was Brad Pitt kind of like in his prime around this time?
Yes, Brad Pitt, because he'd already done A River Runs Through It. Legends of the Fall had come out or was coming out around that same time too. Like he was just firing on all cylinders at that point. He'd already been in the late 80s. He was in Thelma and Louise. That was where he made his breakout performance, and then from then on he was just boom boom boom.
Like for me, I mean, the earliest thing I had seen him in was Interview with the Vampire, and of course, you know, this is a much different role than that. I can appreciate the like darker and like flawed, gritty, realistic character that Brad Pitt was trying to portray in this movie. I did think some of his acting was a little over the top sometimes, which kind of bugged me. But overall, I thought, yeah, he was a damn good actor in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought he played it well. And I remember as a kid being so like in his corner. I only saw it from that perspective. It just made sense to me. Like, yeah, this is just crazy. Who the hell is this Morgan Freeman guy? And then watching it now, I was like, oh wow, this is like his undoing. Just everything. You just see it. It's like a Greek tragedy of sorts, you know. It's just gonna happen. This is just the way things are gonna play out. He is who he is, and this is just how it's gonna.
That makes me think of that. I don't know if it's a meme or something that's going around that says, for the a Goofy movie, when you were a kid, you identify with Max. Oh, you just want to have fun, and your dad's so boring. He wants to go on this road trip. But as an adult, you identify with Goofy, and you're like, "Dang, Max, you're a little jerk. Like, just go hang out with your dad." It's like the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
It's funny you bring that up because I think that's more with my sister, but we do plan on doing that movie at some point.
Oh my God, that's one of my favorite movies. It's so underrated.
It's a classic.
Like,
yeah.
I love it.
I wonder if I'll still enjoy it. I wonder if I'll still enjoy it now, but we'll see. Because I loved that movie.
Yeah.
Even the songs. Like the songs are super catchy.
The songs for sure. I might even be Powerline for Halloween this year.
Nice.
Dang, spoiler alert. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. All right.
I have to learn the perfect cast before I can do it though, if I want to be legit.
So are you gonna have like your friends dress up as well, or is it just gonna be you?
No, just me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Powerline. That's original.
Above the crowd.
Above the crowd.
Of course.
I don't think I've ever seen anyone dress up as Powerline, so that's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, should be fun.
That would be dope. That would be dope. Props for sure. That movie's classic though.
I was thinking because I think you guys were mentioning this earlier. Where is this city exactly? I don't
Dude,
think they ever say.
Thank you, because
I looked it up.
Okay.
I looked it up. It's an unnamed large city. It says on Wikipedia, pretty much.
Nowhere.
It doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just a generic large city.
That's interesting.
Nowhere and anywhere.
Right, because because of the fact that at first it seems like it would be in New York or maybe Chicago or Detroit, but then all of a sudden they're in the fucking desert, and I'm like, okay, well that's Victorville. I mean, well it's out in that area. It's like the high desert area. So I'm like, okay, well they're definitely not in New York. Where the fuck does it rain like this? Where they're in the city and it rains like that, in California. And then all of a sudden, yeah, exactly. So I'm like, well, for them to be able to just make a quick drive, it wasn't that far from the station. I'm like,
they just combined elements from like a lot of big urban areas, and they're like, we're going to construct our own fictitious city,
GTA style.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting that they just decided to not place it anywhere specific. This is kind of cool because they always refer to it as like here or the city, right? Like it's always super generic,
right?
Or this city, and it's almost like you could be near a place like this yourself, and you may not even know it.
Right.
And like how you're saying, it has elements from various places. And so you got these people living in or near these urban areas, and they're probably like, this kind of reminds me of where I live. You know, it could be happening right in your backyard.
Right. Precisely. Maybe that also makes sense to make it anywhere instead of just a very specific place. This could happen to you.
Man, when they were talking about the FBI monitoring the reading habits from the library, I thought that was pretty interesting because they were all talking about how this is like super illegal. I have no doubt that the government and all these agencies are probably monitoring everything that we're doing.
Oh, for sure. I mean, even when you talk about something, all of a sudden you get ads for that on Instagram. Like my boyfriend talks about Star Wars a lot, and all of a sudden I have all the Star Wars stuff. I don't even watch Star Wars. Like, what the heck? But it hears him, and I get Star Wars stuff. So it's kind of funny that you say that too, because I just covered a case of this woman who disappeared, and this reporter like over a year later happened to see that she had checked out a book that she was reading regarding a disappearance of another woman. So then she went back and grabbed a team of several people. They found 25 books that this woman had checked out, and they were all on either strange disappearances, murders, different things like that. And then this woman is disappeared. She's never been found back in the 60s. And I'm like, well, if they saw like my search history right now, like I'm probably on a watch list somewhere. I'm sure I am. But
listen, you have the freedom to read whatever you want until they decide otherwise.
Right. Which is probably coming with the way things are going in this country.
What the killer did not anticipate was that Somerset would be as good, as curious as he was, and asking the right questions, asking really, really good questions, to the point where he didn't even anticipate that they would narrow it down to him so soon. Remember, they end up at his apartment door.
Yeah, that kind of throws a wrench in his plans. But this was some damn good detective work, even though a lot of it, the heavy lifting may not necessarily have been done by either the two main characters. But I mean, that was still like an awesome lead, that he was like, all right, so let's target this range of books and everything that pertains to the 7 deadly sins in some capacity. It was kind of a long shot, it's casting a wide net, and you may not catch anything. It might just be a complete waste of time, and then now you're even further behind the killer. But luckily they got some good information out of it. Kind of reminded me of just like some noir type of moment right here, where it's just like, I'm just like reading through all the details, and eventually you come across that one little bit of detail that you needed.
Yeah. It does. This movie does have that vibe too, especially with like all the rain and the darkness.
Oh man, yeah. I'll talk about it later on because I thought it was pretty cool. But just like, like their dress, they have like the trench coats and like the hats and everything. The rain is just like pouring off of it, and I love the whole aesthetic. Like I thought that was very throwback, and it was cool.
Yeah, the relaxed fit pants and all that.
Kind of remind me of Batman too, though, like the Batman movies.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, Gotham City.
Gotham City.
And how you said this led to the killer's apartment. So they found out where this guy lives. They don't know that this is the killer yet, but they're like, you know what? This guy may be working with the killer, or he might know something about the killer. So let's go check him out. And man, that was such a awesome scene. Tension in the air, when they're standing at the door,
deliberating.
The killer walks up the stairs, and he kind of just like stops in his tracks, and he looks super sus, right? Like this guy's like, whoa, who the fuck is this guy? So he's just like standing there, and you can tell like just from his body language, I thought this was genius because they're still trying to conceal his identity, and he slowly starts walking towards them and kind of like adjusting the bag in his arm, and then suddenly he just starts firing on him. So that's where the chase scene ensues. And this was also pretty old school as well. It's like that chase scene through the rain, through the streets, diving over cars, and stuff like that.
Down the spiral staircase.
Yep.
Firing down on him, and then running through apartments and bathrooms.
Yep. And it always seems like every apartment is connected. You're like following this guy through an apartment, and then it just like goes through door after door after door after door.
Yeah.
But what I thought was crazy is when he goes into the room with the kids watching TV, and they're still just sitting there watching TV. Like some guy didn't just run through and jump out the window. Like they're just acting like nothing happened. And he's like, where'd he go? And they point to the window, and they're just still like watching TV like it's perfectly normal.
The kids are that way though. They're just like super focused on like something on TV, and there could be like gunshots going on around them, and they may not even notice.
Oh, my daughter would. She thinks she has a detective agency.
Oh, does she?
Anything in the neighborhood, she's like, that's suspicious, isn't it? Why is that guy looking at that? Isn't that suspicious? What do you think this is? Do you think this is a clue? I'm like, oh my God, girl.
You trained her well.
I know. We pass a cop, and she's like, I don't think that's really a cop. And I'm like, Emily, it's a cop, okay? Literally wearing a uniform in a cop car. It's a cop.
Have you seen, or have either of you guys seen The Black Phone?
No, but I want to. It looks so good.
Okay, well, what you described kind of reminds me of the sister on there, but yeah, I won't spoil anything. Just go see it. I thought it was pretty cool.
No, I knew. Yeah, from the trailer, you can tell she's a little Nancy Drew. She's like, yeah, something's up with this. I'm going to figure it out on my own.
Good head on her shoulders.
That's awesome.
Hey, another fun fact about this chase scene, that during this adrenaline-inducing chase scene, Brad Pitt legitimately injured his arm. Did you guys know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so you notice like how his hand is like in a cast or whatever, right? It's all wrapped up after the chase.
Mm-hmm.
So that was actually a real cast that he had, because during the chase, he was like doing some of his minor stunts, and I guess he like landed on a car wrong or something, or too hard, and he tried to brace himself by placing his arm on the windshield, and his arm went through the windshield and it just ripped up his forearm.
Oh my god, that's terrible.
So he got messed up. But man, Brad Pitt's a trooper. He got that taken care of. He got the stitches, got a cast, and he went right back to work. So
right. Well, he finished filming that day then, because I mean, he had his arm in what looked like a sling. He was kind of like, he had his arm in the coat or something like that. But when he goes over there, he looks like a wounded bird before he gets the cast on. He's finishing the scene.
I was always wondering, like, when the hell did that happen? When did he get injured? But I just assumed, I was like, I don't know, he bumping into walls and stuff.
Dang,
I guess
he was running on adrenaline.
The director, David Fincher, he actually wrote this into the story by, I guess, explaining it by having him fall off of the scaffolding, like the fire escape.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Him falling into the trash apparently was him like tweaking his arm and him, I don't know, like breaking.
Sure.
Interesting.
Yeah, it just makes me appreciate that scene even more than knowing when he gets chased down, and just the slow, just the anticipation of having the gun pointed at him, like, let's get this shit over with so I can get my arm wrapped and everything. But like having this gun pointed at him in the rain, and he's just like, no.
I don't know if that was before or after the injury, but
Right.
that scene itself, again, like very throwback. I love the angle of it too, because it's pointed, it's like pressed up against his temple, and it's like from his temple's point of view. So it's like looking up the top of the gun towards the killer's face.
Mm-hmm.
The gun is in frame and in focus, but the killer is blurry and his face is still dark. So it's still concealing his identity. And I just love that shot. That was one of my favorites from the movie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Very artistic for sure. Could have just done like a regular side shot of him like holding the gun,
Right.
and still conceal his face. But they want to get a little artsy with it, and I appreciate it.
A little, but it definitely conveys two things. Number one, you still don't know who the guy is because of him still being blurry, so having that shortened depth of field helps. But also the fact that he's over him, so you feel helpless because he's standing over you as the audience, as you're looking.
Because he's pointing
up.
at the camera,
Right,
essentially. Yeah.
Right. So you
true.
feel helpless like he does with the gun being pointed at you. You feel that this guy, although you don't know who he is and may have been injured, he still has more power over you.
Okay. Well, needless to say, Mills fucks up and kicks the door in to John Doe's apartment because, he's just riding on emotions right now. Somerset is trying to tell him, like, listen, we have this guy dead to rights. We'll track him down. We just need to wait for the search warrant to show up. He's just like, nah, I'm doing it now. Boom, and kicks it open. So basically what this does is anything they find in the apartment can't be used against the guy, right? Based off of the laws.
Well, sort of. Only because he finds a loophole. So it's interesting that whole fight that they have between each other. You have Somerset with his morals. His principles are, I'm not going to violate the Fourth Amendment. I'm not going to make this admissible in a court of law, or inadmissible. I don't know which.
And for those listening, can you explain the Fourth Amendment? Like, what is that exactly?
The Fourth Amendment, I actually had to look that up myself.
I did too. Well, it's basically, like, in a nutshell, it's not allowing people to randomly search your home and take your stuff without a warrant.
Without a warrant, which proves probable cause that they have a reason to be there in the first place. And and they couldn't prove that. The only way they could do that was to incriminate the guy who gave them the information in the first place and say it was ill-gotten. And I was like, oh,
the
well,
library books.
Right. That the FBI is spying on people. They can't let that out. So it's like, oh man, we're screwed. So you have Somerset's principles like this, but then you have Brad Pitt's his overwhelming desire to just fucking win and get what he wants. So he finds a loophole. Actually, what he does is he convinces somebody to give an interview to the police that's saying that, yeah, I broke in, or
we found it this way.
Yeah, exactly.
she was a witness. Like, she was a witness, and he had her say she saw something, and then they paid her pretty much.
Yeah, they paid her to be exactly. They paid her for that. So
Yeah.
so it doesn't screw them over. It actually makes it okay. So they could still prosecute based on this person's word.
Well, I mean, what do you guys think of the apartment, John Doe's apartment? We finally get to see what he lives in. Pretty interesting. It says a lot about him too, right? It first shows that he's super religious. I mean, he has like that like neon red cross above his bed. It's almost like a neon wall, almost. And yeah, he doesn't have like Bibles and stuff all over the place, and a lot of religious paraphernalia all throughout the apartment.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. He's like a maximalist.
Instead of a minimalist.
Same as me. More is more.
More
Notebooks upon notebooks upon notebooks.
Seriously, especially when it
Artifacts.
comes to the notebooks.
He's a collector. He's got different souvenirs from some of those crimes in jars.
Yes.
It's crazy because they're taking their time to search the apartment and gather all the clues there, and they realize that, man, trying to read through all those notebooks is going to take a very long time. And so they're kind of distracted with that. And John Doe immediately starts his next plan. So he goes through with lust and pride fairly quickly. I think that's like within like the next day or two, right? Or maybe even the same day.
It was kind of hard to follow the times.
The pace kind of picked up a bit, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Around this time. We don't really need to go like super into them, but Lust is notable for that gnarly jagged knife strap on where they killed the prostitute.
Right.
And you know, like I was like, oh, he made me do it. He held a gun to my head. Which, I mean, shout out to that guy, because that dude was acting his ass off for that minute.
Yeah, he was, dude. Just the stammering and dude, he did a good job. Horrible.
Oh yeah. Pride is notable because the killer himself called it in so that the cops would find it quicker, which I thought was pretty funny. He's kind of like, well, in order for me to get to what I need to do, I got to get these two more sins out of the way. So he just went ahead and did lust and pride.
Yeah.
Right, because they found his living quarters. They rushed his timeline.
Definitely picking up the pace and acting on his victims in a short amount of time. You know, that's why I was like, he had to have done these like back to back, or maybe even set them up simultaneously, because you imagine it takes some prep work, and he had to track down the prostitute and then pick up that strap on from that store, and then that does like the custom work, and then he had to like capture that guy and force him to do it, and then right after that, like immediately go take care of Pride.
But Pride could have been done already, and that's why he called it in, because they hadn't found it yet. It could have been done like several days, maybe not several days, but it could have already been done when they even broke into his apartment, and then they weren't finding it. So he's like, well, I don't know if they're going to find it in time, so I'm going to call it in.
Interesting. That may have thrown off the order of operations.
Right. Well, because she was just, he cut off her nose, and then he glued a phone in her hand, and then he glued a bottle of pills in the other. So her choice was either to call for help, but if she was too prideful to call for help because her face was ruined by her nose being gone, then she would just kill herself. So she did. She ended up killing herself.
That is crazy.
Because she was too prideful.
Now, do you think that was pride, or was she just like in such a crazy state of mind that like maybe you wouldn't want to live through that experience as well? It could have not been pride at all.
And maybe those pills were pain pills. I mean, I can only imagine getting your nose cut off is pretty painful.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I mean, I don't remember if he said something about bleeding out. I don't know if that would even be possible.
No, she was wrapped up, right? Like she had the bandages on her face.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would have like at least like kept her alive for a longer period of time. Like I don't think she was like on the verge of death or anything. But yeah, I mean that's still a pretty shitty situation to be in. I actually thought that was a pretty interesting concept as well. Was the whole like she could have lived, she could have survived, but she chose not to. That was some Saw stuff right there.
Yeah.
Now that those are out of the way, I guess last two would be Envy and Wrath. Somerset around this time as well, having been through this craziness with Mills, I think he says that he wants to like face his fears now and see this case through till the end, whether that's like at the end of the week or end of the year or 10 years from now. I think he said that he's gonna like try to see this case all the way through to the end. So he's kind of postponing his retirement at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So, he's back in the game. I think at this stage, he was only, a day or two away from retirement. And now he's like, nah, I can't leave my boy high and dry like this. I think now he has more of a rapport with Mills. They have more of like a bond, having worked a couple of these cases together now.
But it might just be because it can't be like the one that got away kind of thing. Like detectives always say, there's one case that sticks with me. Though if I had one case that I wish that I would have solved, it's this one. And maybe this was his.
Right.
And he just had to see it through.
Right. And without having, like you were getting too close to actually finding the guy. Whereas before, like you said before, Nicole, how he mentioned that there are so many unsolved cases. Maybe it was like this. He wants a win. He wants to take a W with him into retirement.
Yes. Yeah. He wants to go out with a win. Yeah. And he knows that and like you said, he knows that they're close. So it's not like they're not getting anywhere on this case and he's just going to work it to death.
Right.
But they're close. He knows they're close. He's like, we're right there.
Yeah, they had him on his heels for a second there. He's trying to gather himself.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know what axe he's going to take next. But they know that they're, like you said, they're close and they're on his ass.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, John Doe kind of forces their hand because he actually turns himself in. After he calls in Pride, I think they're arriving at the police station and they're kind of like discussing like what steps they're going to take next. And then who shows up? John Doe himself, and turns himself in.
With blood on him.
Mm-hmm.
And they mention it's two different people's blood that they identified. They're like, one belonged to Tracy and the other one was unidentified.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is foreshadowing for later, which I didn't even pick up the first time I watched it. And then second time I'm like, fuck. Like he had two different people's blood on him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they just kind of gloss over that because they don't ever really mention it again. But I think that's like, that foreshadowing and just that subtext right there is so disturbing.
It is disturbing now that you mention it, and I'll get to why that is so much more disturbing when we get there.
Now it's finally revealed that the killer, more than halfway through the movie, is played by Kevin Spacey.
Ta-da.
He walks in and it's funny because everyone's all like, get on the ground, put your hand behind the head, and they're like trying to like order him around, but he's doing this on his own accord. You don't have to like force him to do anything, but I think that's just like natural reaction.
Yeah.
Everyone's in shock. It's interesting because they're trying to fingerprint him. And the reason why they could never find any fingerprints is because he cut off his fingerprints. So now they're just like all scarred up and he can touch whatever he wants and it's not going to leave any prints, or it's not going to leave anything identifiable. He's John Doe to a T as well. There's like nothing that they can use to identify this guy, like no fingerprints, no bank statements, no employment records. And this guy is just like, no one knows who the hell this guy is. No one's seen him before. He looks fucking hella generic. He's just like a white guy with a shaved head, no facial hair. He doesn't really have like very many features that you can use to distinguish him.
Well, and that's why he was able to be at all the scenes and not stand out, not be memorable as somebody they'd seen before.
Yeah, I mean, didn't they even draw up a little sketch and it's just like a circle with some eyes and like, I think he had like a cleft chin and that was it. That's all that they could go off of. So I thought that was very funny. And now we finally get to the climax of the movie. So the reason why they don't exactly have him dead to rights is because he, alongside his lawyer, claims that he's just going to say that he's insane to get a lesser sentence instead of getting like the maximum penalty. So his terms are that he wants Somerset and specifically David Mills to escort him. He can be handcuffed and everything. He can be hogtied for all he cares, but he wants to be escorted out to the specific location for an unknown reason.
Doesn't he say he's going to reveal the last two victims?
And I think that's what it is. Yeah,
the last part of his plan.
I think that's what it was, because then they said, "Well, look, do you think the public's going to be okay with you letting him get off and knowing that there are two other dead bodies out there that have not been identified yet?"
I mean, I guess they kind of just took their chance, probably, looking for these two dead bodies while they're heavily guarding this guy. I mean, they got the chopper, they got like backup, no doubt, like a couple miles back, and they're just closely monitoring this whole trip out to the middle of the field, the middle of nowhere, essentially. And who knows what they're going to find out there. such a tense scene for me when I first watched it, because I remember distinctly how I felt. I was on this high. Like, I'm just like, man, I have no idea what's going to happen right now. Events are kind of moving quicker towards the end of the movie. They're having this private conversation in the car, and man, he's now that you're getting to interact with him and pick his brain about stuff and see how he reacts to things, you see how crazy and how scary this guy is. Super intelligent. He knows exactly what he's doing. He has everyone, even though they look like they're in control, he's totally having them fall right into his plan and making it seem like they're the ones that are deciding what happens, you know?
Yeah. I think it would be interesting if they did, it wouldn't necessarily be a sequel or a follow-up, but if they did the movie Seven from his point of view and they showed him like how he chose the people and how he orchestrated everything and made sure everything met up time-wise, because what it comes down to them in this field is he had to know how long it was going to take them to
Drive out there.
not just drive out there, but for him and his attorney to convince them to drive out there. Because,
Okay.
I mean, a lot of times cops will be like, no, we're not going to allow you anything, you know? And sometimes it just, everything takes time, you know? So, like, how did he know specifically at this time, this is what time I need it to be delivered because that's the time we're going to be there, kind of thing?
He didn't even seem like he was too pressed for time either, right? Because
No.
he's just kind of like going along with the flow. So I wonder if he even accounted for that. Like, maybe he knew that once they got out there, maybe it was going to be like 15 minutes late and he can just like buy their time, you know, just draw it out, have them like go around in circles until that van showed up.
Yeah.
Did you guys also notice, like, just before they left, you know how they're like wiring up whatever? Did you notice the foreshadowing with Mill's wife going into the climax of the film?
Him talking about her.
They're just like, oh, do we get a workers' comp for shaving off a nipple or whatever? And they're just like cracking up. So what I liked about this scene was that at surface level, it seems like, you know, they're kind of breaking the tension. But if you listen to the music was super eerie. It was really ominous, even though like this was like a comedic sort of scene, like more of like a lighthearted scene. That music was really ominous and it's really uneasy. It kind of had like these low tones and everything. I was paying attention to the things that Mills was saying right here, because I think a lot of people were maybe still too focused on the fact that, oh, the killer's here, John Doe's here. What's he going to do? What's the next part of his plan? I was also really interested in that conversation that they're having when they were wiring up. And Mills mentions that even his wife doesn't have cable in like the same scene, but later on he says, if I keep coming home late, my wife is going to think something's up. And so they keep mentioning the wife going into the climax, which I thought was like, oh, damn. They're not putting too much focus on it, that it's going to give it away, but they want to make sure that it's like in recent memory.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not just that, also the fact that despite his drive to find this killer and do a good job and, I don't know, cut his teeth, be a great detective, he still loves her, you know, even though he may not have said it throughout. He does still love her, and she loves him. They click. They've been high school sweethearts or something like that.
He hasn't been spending that much time with her, and he would like to like get back to her like once they're done with this case and they put this guy away. You know, he's kind of fantasizing about this, but it's too little too late.
Right.
So once they get out to the middle of nowhere, what do they find? They don't find anything at first. But then this random van shows up and they think that it's backup for him, right? Like maybe some sort of escape route. Immediately, Somerset, he stops that van. I think he gets in the car and he cuts it off way in advance and forces this delivery guy to hand over the box.
Well, it works out perfectly. It works out the way that that John Doe wants it to, because Somerset was already away from him, the two of them. I forget what had been discussed before, but it was set up perfectly for John Doe to be with Detective Mills,
because
by himself.
when they're by themselves, he just keeps jabbing at him, right? Like he's just like getting under his skin. He's like saying all these things under his breath. Mills is just keeps telling him to shut up, and like, you know, he's really frustrated, but he's also really concerned. And so they thought it was a bomb at first. And I mean, Somerset, you know, I guess he's thinking like, hey, better me than someone else. So he's willing to take the bullet. He orders the guy to drop the box, back away, and he finally cuts it open, but they don't ever show what's in the box. I like how they did this, because you don't need to over explain things. There's almost like an ambiguity about like how you have this box and you see that there's like some blood on it, but you don't exactly know what's in this box.
But
Right.
sometimes like they do this because sometimes your imagination is worse than what they can present you with.
I could
So
see that.
like you can just like picture like the most horrible thing, and you're thinking like, oh, his wife was pregnant. What does it have to do with that? Does it have to do with that? Is it something else?
Yep.
Like, what is it though? Because you don't even know. I wasn't even thinking his wife when I was a kid. I had no clue what it was. I was just like, because it's warm. The last feelings you are left with are warm feelings because of Brad Pitt, because of Mills saying what he said about, oh, I'm gonna make it up to her.
And you can tell that this whole time Mills was the target. John Doe does interact with Somerset in some ways, but like he always keeps going back to Mills. Like he's just like targeting Mills. Like that's his focus. He's getting more reactions out of Mills. But I think that he knew that from the beginning. Like just as long as what he plans with Mills goes through.
So I wonder though when Mills became his target, because Mills couldn't have been one of his original targets because he had just moved to the city, and the sloth guy, he had been, letting him deteriorate for over a year. So I wonder I wonder if he then was showing up at the scenes and that's when he was like admiring him and wanting to be him.
Maybe.
Like, which feeds back into it, but there's no way he was one of the original targets.
What if he only became his final target after he pissed him off by chasing him down?
Right.
And he held that gun to his head. And what if in that moment he just decided, no,
I got something for you.
I got something special. I could kill you right now, but I'd rather
something better.
Yeah, bigger plans for you.
He was like in the right place at the right time. That's it right there. Envy, wrath. That's how I'm going to do this.
Yeah. But then I wonder if, because didn't they had another person's blood on him, I wonder if maybe he had another victim that was originally, and he already took care of them, but then he's like, no, this works better.
No, here's what I was gonna get at, which is what's kind of more horrifying. And I'd heard it said before, but I hadn't thought about it. It didn't click for me until just now. He explains what it is in the box, what something is in the box, and he says, because I admire you so much, and for your life and all the X, Y, and Z, I envy you, and therefore my sin is envy. For your wife, you have a life that I don't live, and therefore I envy you, which seems so. I won't even get into that just yet. So he says that to him, and he tells him to become wrath. We know he says, I cut off her head. He says, I cut off her pretty head. So her head is in the box. We know that much to be true.
Well, I feel like what's kind of left to the imagination is you don't know if it's definitely something immediately recognizable. So I don't know if it's her head, because that seemed like a small box, or it could have just been like her face or something.
It could have been, but he did say he cut off her head at the very least.
Right.
That's what
something dealing with the head.
Right. So I cut off her head. But he said, he says he didn't know she was pregnant, and that's when it all fucking comes apart, and he's just like reeling from it, and that's when he ends up shooting him. But if you think about it, reverse that, boom, when he says, he didn't know, because she said he begged for the life of her unborn child. Right. So that means that John Doe knew that she was pregnant because she begged for her child's life before he severed her head. It means he cut out the fetus, and that was in the box as well.
That's the other person's blood that was on him, was the unborn baby.
That's why it was unidentifiable.
I think that's what they were alluding to. So that's why I was like, man, that is freaking horrifying.
Next level.
That's why there's no record of it, because this person doesn't technically exist yet.
Right.
But it would have been a match to the half of the mothers, because mitochondrial DNA doesn't change that much. That's the DNA you get from your mom down your mother's line.
Would it still register as like a different person? Would it be different enough?
Well, it is, and I don't know if DNA was advanced at this point, or if the advances in modern technology has made us, every second DNA is advanced more than it was before.
Sure, it's that much is true, but I actually had to look this up too because I saw that and I was like, okay, different blood type. And I thought, does the blood in the mom circulate through the child's body as well? It was kind of confusing. I didn't get to the bottom of that, but so because through the umbilical cord, all that. But I do know that my brother was okay. So my mom has O positive, I'm O positive, but my brother was born AB positive. So they had two different blood types in her body, which led to some complications as it ended up turning out. But that was definitely true. That much I know to be true. So I'm like, okay, it's possible to have a different blood type than the mom.
Yeah, that's what I thought they were alluding to. I don't know if that's actually accurate or not, but that's really the only other body that I think made the most sense, was because that all ties back to Mills, and that was ultimately the straw that broke the camel's back, and that was what was going to get him to become Wrath. Because I don't know if necessarily even killing the wife would have taken him all the way there. He was definitely pissed off and everything. Man, the unborn child and killing it, proudly displaying the blood of the fetus on him at the police station, that I think that was just like, I cannot let this piece of trash, this evil person, live any longer.
And Somerset knew that too. That's why he backhands him. He's all, shut up.
He's like, don't listen to him.
Yeah, but but he's standing there. Yeah, and he that's when he backhands him, and he's like, you know, your wife. He's like, shut up. Smacks him, and he's like, oh, he didn't know. After he's like, he just got punched in the face, and he's just like, oh, he didn't know. It's like even juicier for him. Like, oh, this is really gonna seal the deal.
Well, the only thing is if she was like early enough along that he didn't know, even though they slept in the same bed and everything, like, I don't know if a fetus would have even been recognizable in the box. Or I mean, it just all depends on like how far along it is. So I just kind of go back to maybe he did have another Wrath victim out there, or envy victim out there, but he just saw that this was playing out perfectly and decided to take advantage.
It was too perfect, I feel like, for him.
Yeah.
So what'd you guys think of the infamous box scene?
What's in the box?
What's in the box? The famous line.
Everybody knows that.
That was cringe every time I watched it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it still made me cringe, but it was also like, just like the desperation of it. Like, he just got rid of any kind of like trying to be anything else, you know. Like, he had so much ego before, and that was him, like, without any ego. He was just so desperate to know. He did know, but he wanted to know, but he also didn't want to know at the same time.
I thought Brad Pitt's acting was great throughout the movie, and of course Morgan Freeman was like flawless, but this was one of the scenes where I was just like, had they gone with a different actor, would the scene have been better? We'll never know, but you know, this was just Brad Pitt's take on the scene, and it was just like the constant drastic changes between the different emotions, right? Because he's like angry, and then he's like distraught, and then he's like angry again, and the fact that he just keeps like lowering the gun and like lifting up again, and it seemed a little comical to me, the overacting, but you know, for the most part, it didn't ruin the movie for me at all. It was still enjoyable.
To me, I don't know, it didn't seem like overacting. I and perhaps this is just me going in like with that those same rose-colored glasses as when I was a kid, because it made such an impact on me. It was huge. I appreciated it just to watch him cycle through them like that, because he really wants so badly, because he's such a physical person as it is. He wants to do things, and it's like he's so quick to act. He's like, oh, got the gun up there. He's like, I'm going to do this. But then he also sees how Somerset was right. He's going to win if he does this. But it's like, again, the Greek tragedy of it. You know, this is the kind of this guy is very impetuous. He's very reactive. This is going to just happen. You just see it. It's going to play out the way that it's going to play out. No matter what impact Somerset has made on him as a detective, it's a small victory to be like, oh yeah.
You don't know like what he's going to do. He could go either way. He could not play the game and not let the killer win, you know, not let John Doe win, or he could fall right into it and ruin his life forever. I mean, his life was already ruined, but you know, like ruin his career.
Right.
In the end, one outweighed the other, and he became Wrath. Finally took John Doe's life.
Become Wrath, right? He didn't just say feel wrath. He was like, become it. Like, let it consume you.
It's almost like the dark side. Like the dark side took over.
Do it.
I'm sure your boyfriend can appreciate that reference.
Yes, I'm sure he will.
Yeah, that's a tough scene. You let him win, but it's like, that's a small victory compared to what I could get right now by just ending him. Maybe
Yeah.
he'd rot away in jail, but maybe he wouldn't. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
It shows what happened to Mills after he became Wrath. You know, he's almost in this catatonic state. Like he doesn't even know what to do with himself anymore. What's going to happen in the future? What's going to happen with the rest of his life? Like, I think everything is just, it got turned upside down completely for him. And so they leave that part ambiguous. You know, he's like in the back of the cop car. No one knows what the hell's going to happen to him. They take him away, and Somerset is talking to the captain. And this was pretty interesting because even though this is the end of the case, Somerset still decides that he doesn't want to retire. Like he wants to continue working. Surprisingly, he still has more to give. Like it's interesting because this is such a big change for his character, comparing it to the beginning of the movie where he was just like, you know, really negative and he had no hope for the world. And after going through this tragic event, it's like working with Mills, he convinced Somerset that there is good to be had in the world, and it's worth fighting for. That was that mentality and that energy, that drive that Mills had before. Since Mills is no longer able to do that, to carry that out, Somerset is the one that kind of picked it up and is going to run with the ball now.
How I saw it was, now that he saw that Mills's whole life was taken away from him, his job, his family, everything was taken away. It made him realize that he has literally nothing except for the job. So he might as well stick with the job because he has nothing else to do besides the job.
Until it kills him or other means. Yeah, that's crazy. It was interesting to see a killer that molds his motives around the 7 deadly sins. Most of the sins kind of make sense to me, but I feel like the only one that I was a little confused about, and maybe I just don't quite understand, was sloth. Just the sin itself, not the crime scene, but like, how's that sin defined?
I think it's just like,
what makes it a sin?
Being like lazy in like a bunch of ways, like not taking care of yourself or your family, like not having a job. That's how I always saw it.
Okay. Yeah, because I always thought of it like that, like it was just being lazy, and I'm like, man, it's a sin to be lazy. That seems kind of like a stretch to me.
Yeah, but I think it's just also not kind of like living off other people, being like a moocher, not pulling your weight, you know, just being like somebody that weighs other people down.
Oh, we all know someone like that who just mooches off of people.
Yeah.
That is a wrap, folks. If you made it to the end of our podcast, then you should be receiving your own box very soon. Any thoughts or closing comments?
This is like one of my favorite types of scary movies because I like the suspense, the thrill. I like the kind of scary movie that has thought to it. I don't like slashers and gore and shock factor. I want to be able to try to solve the case. Like, I want to be one of the detectives. So this is like one of my favorite types. I like the type of cases that have like a personal element to it, where there's some form of connection, or I want to know the why. That's why I kept saying, like, well, I want to know how he found these people and why he chose them. Like, I want to know the why. And like, Criminal Minds is like my favorite show. I like Mindhunter. I want to know the why. I want to know why they chose to do this, or what is driving them.
I almost feel like, since you're into the true crime and all that stuff too, this is why I don't like watching that with Brenda, is because most of those cases, since those are real cases, they're not for Hollywood or anything like that. A lot of them are just left unsolved. It's just like, well, now that you know all these facts, the killer's never found, or the killer got away, or the case is still ongoing with no leads. And I'm just like, this freaking sucks. There's no closure to any of this. It's not satisfying.
Right. Well, I mean, but like I said earlier, your imagination can kind of fill in the blanks, and all these unsolved crimes, everybody has like their theory about who did it, why they did it, how it happened. Everybody has their theory on like the ending of it. And sometimes when these long unsolved cases are finally solved, it's kind of anticlimactic. Oh, it was the neighbor that did it, or it was whatever, you know. And sometimes you know who did it the whole time, and it's just frustrating, like in the West Memphis 3. everybody knows who did it, but they just don't want to admit that they're wrong and that they got the wrong guys. I don't know. The unsolved cases are the ones that get me the most, though. Like, they're frustrating and you do want them to be solved, but it's also like intriguing.
As a kid, there weren't many shows that freaked me out, but the one that I could hear the intro for that would always, I would leave the room. I could watch scary movies as a kid. I was watching Michael Myers, but whenever Unsolved Mysteries theme song came on, I was like, no, because every time I sat there through one of them, it was like, oh, this kid got shot in the face in a park and he died. If you have any details about, and I'm just like, what? That person's still there? I'm like, dude. And I remember one kid got shot and killed, and it was a case of mistaken identity. And I thought to myself, well, I'm Mexican and I live here, and there's like tons of Mexicans and there's gangsters. Like, what if I look like somebody? A case of mistaken identity. So I was like, I'm never wearing any kind of gang affiliated colors.
You gotta get rid of your LA Dodgers tracksuit
and my Raiders. Orale.
Oh man.
Yeah, with Se7en having been released in 95, man, I'm gonna say this is still a damn good movie. Of course, I was saying, like, I had some minor gripes with the acting, mainly Brad Pitt. I mean, Morgan Freeman killed it, of course, pun intended.
Yeah, he did.
But, believe what you will about Kevin Spacey, the person. As an actor, I felt like he had a haunting performance in this movie.
Yeah,
and
because he's a monster in real life.
Exactly, because for good reason.
It's one of those situations where, are you able to separate the art from the artist? Like, I don't know. That's hard to say. It's kind of like a case by case basis for me.
It is for me too. I have a hard time because I love the Backstreet Boys. Always have and always will. And like, they've gotten me through a lot of tough times when I was like younger, oh, their music means so much to me,
That's Brenda's favorite band, by the way, growing up.
Oh, heck yeah. But Nick's a rapist and Brian is like a member of QAnon. So, it's tough. Some of them, though, I'm like, it's easy to just be like, yeah, I'm done with you. You meant nothing to me before, but it's like kind of like a family situation, like a family member does something and you're like, I don't know. What's our relationship like? Let's see if I'll overlook this or not.
It's like they're a criminal, but you're like, I mean, you're still my family, but I'm not going to tell you my address because I don't want you showing up. We'll Skype for Thanksgiving. How about that?
I'll hide my IP address.
I did enjoy that final line too. Talking about Ernest Hemingway, the quote where the world is a fine place and is worth fighting for. And I agree with the second part. That clarifies where he's at now towards the end of the movie.
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, before we go, Nicole.
Yes.
How can folks find your podcast, Dark Chatter?
We are on like any of the platforms that you normally use, I guess. We're also on Instagram, Dark Chatter Podcast. You can email us at darkchatterpodcast@gmail.com. We're on Facebook.
When do episodes drop typically?
That's a good question.
I like to keep us guessing, I guess.
That's
part of the charm.
We shoot for every other Friday, but we've had a curse hanging over us, and it's been technical difficulties and injuries and this and that. And so it was like, I think 2.5 months between like a couple episodes because it was just issue after issue. But it seems like we are on track now for every other Friday.
It kind of sounds similar to having you as a guest on our show. There just kept all these events just kept happening. But you know what? You're such a good sport about it, and I want to thank you for that.
It's probably me that brought this on to you guys. I just carried the curse carried over.
Now that you mention it, this never happens. This has never happened to us.
I was born on Friday the 13th. Jinx is practically my middle name.
I mean, it's always a treat whenever an episode drops, and they're always so fun to listen to. Honestly, like I just listened to the last one, and you guys talking about Redlands and stuff. You can always tell that on Dark Chatter that the hosts are just having a good time whenever you guys are recording.
We've been friends for a long time.
That's right. Three best friends from Redlands.
Three best friends from Redlands, California.
Friendly reminder, Aflixionados podcast is available on all major podcast streaming services with new episodes dropping on the first Saturday of each month, 5 a.m. Pacific. Thank you to all the listeners out there for joining Nicole, Michael, and I. This has been Aflixionados Podcast, episode 16, 7, and we will see you all next time.